This episode of the CUInsight Experience is brought to you by Allied Solutions. With over 40 years of experience, our friends at Allied Solutions are focused on helping more than 4,000 clients grow their bottom line, protect their business and members, and evolve to stay ahead of the competition. Welcome to episode 136 of the show. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and this show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders of the credit union movement who make it so great. This is a very special episode. We are recording this on stage, live, in front of an audience. That's pretty amazing. So that's a first at the MAC conference in Chicago. So let's see how this goes. But I can tell you, I'm really excited. Today, I get to have a conversation with Jennifer D'Amico and Randy Schultz. Jen is the VP of Marketing at Commonwealth Central Credit Union in California. And Randy is the VP of Marketing at Strum out in Seattle. And I will tell you this, if it was anybody else who asked me to do this, I would not be doing this today. But for these two, I love them, and I think Mac's amazing. So here we go. This is going to be a blast, and let's just jump right in. Jennifer, Randy, welcome to the show, my friends.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so happy
Randy.
to be here.
Jen's between two Randys. Brian Scott is going to be so disappointed it wasn't him. So, well, let's just jump right in. I love asking this question because I know most of us didn't grow up like, someday I want to work in credit unions. What'd you want to be when you were growing up, Jen? And how did you find credit unions and where we are today?
Okay. Well, honestly, I wanted to be like a professional singer when I grew up. So that didn't happen, but that's okay. I came across credit unions just from a boss that told me that, hey, I'm working at this credit union. I think you would really like it. I was still in college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I landed in credit unions. And that was about 20 years ago, believe it or not. And I've been living and breathing in credit union marketing ever since.
The three of us were talking earlier about that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We get here and now we can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah.
Randy, how about you? How'd you get here?
My journey started a little bit before Jen's did.
Just a little bit.
I'm a little more seasoned marketer, we'll put it that way. When I got through school, I was looking at being a music teacher. I had a major in music and minor in business and couldn't find a job. I don't know if it was my music, may have been. But I ended up going to work at a collection agency, of all things, and skip tracing for them. And the owner was a Rotarian. He knew somebody that was a credit union CEO and got us connected together. And I ended up being their first credit union marketing person. That was Kaiser Trentwood Federal Credit Union. It's now Horizon Credit Union in Spokane. So from there, ended up hooking up with Mr. Weber, who I knew when he was also in credit unions, and been at Strum now for 18 years.
Wow, that's amazing. So you guys, there was an amazing keynote this morning. It has me all excited, and I know like coming to Mac, it does that. What has you two most excited about credit unions as we look forward? Like, I think we're all good with not talking about the past couple of years. So as we're looking forward, what has you most excited?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I know we say we don't want to look too far past in the previous years, but I think there's definitely some silver lining that we've all seen. I think our opening session was on data analytics. I get really excited about data analytics and how we can utilize that data and overlay it with what's happening with our members and what their needs are. And I think we just have some amazing opportunities. And I think we're taking some leaps and bounds and getting our hands on that data and working, through it with lots of people in our organization. So I would say that's one big thing. The other thing is just thinking about culture and member experience, which was one of the things we talked about earlier today, where we think we just have so many opportunities. And I love being surrounded by so many credit union marketers where we're passionate about this and we can go back to our organizations and really drive that message home. And so it's awesome to get that little inspiration here again too.
Something you said, and I don't think any of us can say it anymore, is like there's been a lot of change, right? Like in a lot of moving forward, we can't say we're old and can't make change or whatever anymore.
Exactly.
We shown that's not the case. Randy, what has you excited?
Yeah, well, pretty much the same thing that Jen just said. But you know what? I think it's the fact that we're used to change now. Our members are used to change. Everybody's used to change. Expectations are higher. So we should be able to go back and kind of flood our management teams and boards and everybody with that same change, that it's so much more acceptable now than it's ever been. Plan more, use your data more. We've got such a bigger opportunity to use more sophisticated analytics, more sophisticated partners than we've ever been able to before. So it's going out there and being part of the solution now, having marketing help guide the organization, not sit back and wait for somebody to tell us that we need to do a loan campaign or whatever else it might be. But we've got to start pushing harder.
Absolutely. It does seem like, I don't know if you feel this as well, but it does seem like over the past few years, marketers are getting that seat at the table that maybe they weren't in the past, right? Some are even becoming the CEOs.
Yeah. And some of them have. Some of them that used to come to this conference.
Where's
right?
Paris?
She's here.
Yeah. She was on the show. We'll link to her episode too. So, one of the things that I love about hosting this podcast is this idea that I just get to ask smart people questions, and a lot of those are scratch my own itch questions. So I figure if I'm interested, other people might be too. But I love the idea of talking about like those life hacks that we've learned along the way. And I heard this question in another podcast, and it was, what was that like greatest investment that you ever made in your career? And I used the example because that's what the other podcast used, was Warren Buffett said it was the Dale Carnegie course. Is there something that you can think of? Randy, you want to go?
Yeah. I think for me, it was getting involved in a service organization as soon as I got into credit unions. I had somebody sponsor me. I ended up in Rotary, still in Rotary. And to be around more leaders, more businessmen, you just get a whole different thought pattern about what is out there, not just thinking about your members all the time, but thinking about the communities that you're in, being able to go out and be part of the impact that you're making in those communities, and then being able to share some of those stories, and just you get down and dirty into the community rather than doing it from the surface.
That's cool.
Yeah.
John?
I would say, just to kind of echo what Randy said, just immersing myself in the credit union movement, in marketing, inside and outside of the industry. Obviously, I'm part of MAC. I've been part of MAC for a long time now, and I've made some amazing connections, and just really people who are now my lifelong friends, but they're my sounding board, and they're the people that I can go to and connect with, or just being part of organizations like CUIs, or, I've done the Reach Innovation Group and things like that, and just kind of continually learning and being open to that learning, and just diving straight into being connected and being part of credit unions.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Don't be afraid to go and ask and be able to join something, whether it's CUIs, CUNA, MAC. Make sure you're reading CUInsight, Financial Brand. There's so many trade pubs. That's part of your job, is to see what's going on out there and educate a lot of the other people who are in your organization, including your board. They've got a pretty myopic view of things, as some of you may have learned over the years, or just finding out. So part of our job is to get them thinking like us, because the reality is they want us thinking like them more, right? So, the more ammunition you have, the more chances you have to educate them, the better off you're going to be. And it's going to be much easier to get new things done.
To echo what Jen was saying, one of the reasons that the inspiration for this podcast was that I felt so fortunate to go running around all these conferences. At a point, I think I was going to 15 of them a year or something, but it was, if I had a question about something, we all like to share, right? Like, I had so many people that I could just pick their brain, and it was like that community. And I felt so fortunate. I was like, ooh, what if I could just record those conversations? Let everybody listen to them. But that goes back to, if you're thinking of starting a podcast, what interests you? Make sure it's fun. I have a question about teams, and this is one that I've talked a lot about asked questions a lot about the last couple of years, but it was so interesting as I was putting it together for you two, because not only like the people that you bring onto your teams, and we know that credit unions are all different sizes. So sometimes it's a one-person marketing department, and sometimes it's much bigger, right? But then this morning, I really started, and I kind of threw this out to you before we hit record, was like the idea of not only bringing in people that fit the culture of the credit union, but like, as you were talking about, Randy, being involved in the community as well. As marketers, like, we're really tasked to spread that culture, the story of the credit union internally. We were talking call centers, making sure that they know it, but also externally, whether it's the members, the community, and everything else. So I guess, Jen, I'll start with you. Like, when you think of building that team or the people that you're looking to add to the team, what do you look for? And is there a no-go? Is there something where you're like, no, you're not for us?
Gosh. Well, like you said, I think culture is such a big part of it, right? We want people that are authentic and passionate and want to do what's best for members and potential members, right? So we're always looking for ways to make sure we know that somebody is genuine and they really care and they're just here to help the membership. And so I think the culture piece is really important. We've spent time building out our culture and telling member stories and teaching people that way, what we do for members. And so I think, keeping that member at the center of everything that we do is a really important piece of it. And, you're not going to get everybody to buy into your culture, right? And you don't always know that from the get-go. So I don't know if I have a specific no-go. I just think, we want to bring on people who are genuine and authentic and we can, get that from them during an interview process or when we're having them join our teams. Like, we want them to believe in the why behind our organization.
Because I think a lot of times they don't know what a credit union is. They saw the job and it looked cool. And then you've got to go, yeah, do you know what a credit union is? And they go, no, we have no idea what a credit union is. But I think if you can find people that are not like you, it makes it even easier to really dig into them rather than trying to mirror yourself. You're already there. You don't need another one of you. But, I think a lot of it is looking at if they volunteer for things, what they do out in the community, how they feel about things in the community. Are they a member of an animal rescue place? Do they volunteer at a soup kitchen, do some of those things that should be on their resume? If it's not, ask them what some of their other interests are. You can tell a lot about a person by what they do that's extracurricular. And if it's, I just kind of work my job 9 to 5 and go home. I'm not sure that that's not a no-go for me anyway, because you're going to want them out there being passionate about what you guys are involved in and going out and volunteering places and finding new places for you guys to volunteer. So I think that energy, that passion about whatever they're involved in, you want them to bring that to work.
And sometimes it's just bringing people along with you, right? Even outside of the marketing department, we're often just trying to get our teams to be ambassadors for the credit union and telling them the things that we're doing and why we're doing them and how awesome it is to be out in the community to say hello to our members and ask them how they're doing. And so a lot of it's trying to just bring people along on that journey as well.
Okay, now you got me going deeper here, so it's your fault. Any hacks that you've picked up along the way? Like you said, you've been with credit union for a while. When you're trying to, now speaking outside the marketing department, right? But where you're trying to get other people to be the credit union's ambassador out there. And I guess I'd ask that on two different sides. And Randy, I'll go to you on this too, because you guys do quite a bit of rebranding and, making it, just slapping up the new logo is not it, right? Like, right. So how do you get maybe the question is buy-in to be out there more in the community or to represent the credit union in that way? And is there also a side of that, like, how do you, when a new person comes in, what's that onboarding process to say, this is why we're different or what we are?
Sure. So this is, I think, always a little bit of a challenge, and it's going to be an ongoing thing. We can't just rebrand or have a new logo or have new colors and say, okay, good, now we're done, right? It's an iterative thing. It's ongoing. And so we try to do that within our organization. It is, like I said, it's a little bit of a challenge at times, right? We want people to understand our brand, who we are, what we stand for. And so that's a really important piece of it. One of the things that I do with every single new hire that comes through is go through our branding process that we went through several years ago now to talk about who we are, to talk about, our brand elements and personality and all of that stuff, and to showcase what we do in the community. And oftentimes, especially when even when we have, new tellers coming from Wells Fargo or something like that, they watch our brand video and they're like, wow, we never did anything like this, right? And so they're just, it kind of gets them in that mindset from the very beginning, because they're overwhelmed with the operational things that they're learning as a new hire, right? Like, I got to learn how to use this system and that system and all of this stuff, but they just kind of get that initial feel for it. And then we hope that we can carry that forward.
Randy, so somebody makes the investment. do all the work? How do you make sure it actually?
I think part of the work is getting them invested early. So doing a brand is not a marketing exercise. It's a business exercise, and you get everybody 100% involved, from the lowest employee on the totem pole to your oldest board member. Everybody's got to be involved at some point. And then it's communication, transparency in what you're doing, how you're doing it, building teams out of when you're doing it, not waiting until afterwards and go, well, now you're on this committee and you're on that committee. You build those teams during the process. And at the end, making a big deal out of it. Everybody involved, get them involved in something. If you're doing a brand launch, Pan Air Credit Union years ago, and you guys should talk to Pam Hatt about what she does in the community. She's the VP of marketing down there. Just tell her I told you to call her, and she'll love that.
We'll link to Pam in the show notes also for everybody at her LinkedIn page or something.
But they rebranded several years ago, and the big thing is to have your staff be able to have a story to tell after this thing is done. When you've got them, they're excited, they're energized, they want to go out and tell the story of your credit union to other people. It can't be about products and services and rates and fees. It's got to be about who you are and what you're doing. So they had a company come in and put out on tables during their brand launch 50 unassembled bicycles. And some of you guys have probably done this or heard about it before. But they had their staff build these bicycles for 50 kids in the Boys and Girls Club there that didn't have the means to get a bicycle, didn't have one, could never afford one. And I still get choked up about it a little bit because they had the 50 bikes built. At the end of the day, the CEO stands up and says, there's somebody else here who'd like to thank you for these bicycles. Back doors opened up and these 50 little kids came running in to get these bicycles. Well, that is a story that every employee was able to tell when somebody went out and said, well, why should I join Pan Air? And every one of them said, let me tell you what we just did for 50 kids that are part of the Boys and Girls Club here. And, this is where you get them. Not as much here, but here. And that's what we've got to get them involved in when you're doing a brand, is make sure everybody's bought into that thing with something they can tell people.
And that's good stuff there. So I've got a question, and there's so much to this ties into some of the other sessions that have been going on here. But one of the things that I struggled with at CUInsight was the idea of when one of my brilliant ideas didn't work and knowing when to just get rid of it or stop. It's a question that I love to ask leaders. And I think about it with marketers even more is you can't be afraid to try stuff. But that idea that you were like, this is it, this is going to crush it. And it doesn't. How do you walk away from it? Have you figured out how to kill the idea timely?
I'll try to tackle that. I don't know if I have a good specific example at the moment, but I feel like it's constant, trying new things and seeing if it works and then shifting gears if it doesn't. There's so many things in marketing. We were even talking earlier about this balancing act of driving in new business and showing those specific results versus sharing your brand and sharing your stories. And so I think it's a constant balancing act, and we're always shifting, and that's the beauty of some of the new ways that we can market to our members and market to our communities is a lot of it's digital today, right? So when you do need to shift gears and optimize, you say, okay, well, let's turn this off and try this new thing. And that's how we test it out. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes we think it's working in marketing, and then other areas might say, well, I don't really see the difference in the loan results on the bottom line or things like that. And so we're always trying to keep those things in mind and iterate on those things and try to keep getting better. So marketing is just a never, we're always learning. It's never the same as it once was, right? We don't do the huge campaigns that we did in the past where it was just everybody, spray and pray. We've probably heard at least a few times at this conference so far. So it's just kind of that process. And I think that's part of the reason why we have such an exciting job in marketing is that there is never a dull moment and you never know everything. You never know how to do everything, right? You're always learning.
Well, I would say for both of you too. I mean, all three of us have been around for a while. Things have changed quite a bit from what marketing looks like from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it happens to be, right? How do you make sure you're still staying ahead of that curve and you are getting out of that mindset of and Randy, I'll start with you, but that's the way it's always been done, Randy.
Yeah. How many of you have heard that one before, right? I think a great class to take is an improv class if you haven't taken it, because that's kind of what we do almost every day in some way, shape, or form. We
have a mic here if you want to give us some. You can just stand up and
no, but it's, it's that if you've taken an improv class or been to any of them, there's this exercise they call yes and, where you don't tell people no, you tell them yes, and to get them to talk about it more, and then you give them an idea and then go back and forth, and all of a sudden that idea was over here and down here could be up in here someplace, and you've created something completely different and so much better than it even started when somebody brought it to you or you thought of it. I think we just have to change our brain a little bit on how we're working. Bonin talked about it a lot this morning. That was a fabulous shock kind of, I think, to everybody's brain. I'd like to send that out to every credit union leadership team and board to listen to. And some of them are going to understand that. And I think that's a lot of it is we've just got to shift how we do things a little bit and keep moving it forward.
And I would add to that, just asking, why are we doing this the way that we've always done it? What is the reason, and how can we just empower our whole organization to ask why, not just marketing or not just lending or whoever, just what are we doing in our area that we've been doing for 500 years that we could change or make better or, improve. So I would say asking why is something we do on my team often.
Yeah. You know what? I think we could probably go out on a limb and say, if you guys are doing anything yet the way that it has always been done, you're in big trouble.
Let me ask again, it's just kind of that hacks question, but any tips on getting buy-in, let's say, up the organization outside of the marketing department? You talked about bringing people through. We talked about a little bit about onboarding maybe or getting the culture out deeper. But when, I would say that many times we see, and as an organization grows, the risk tolerance goes down. So if there's something new you want to try, people may view that as risky. Even if it's not doing it's probably the risky thing, right? So do you have a process for, I guess, getting the buy-in from above that you're going to need to ultimately have success?
I mean, I think a lot of it has to just do with transparency, right? Especially even at the executive level, talking with our team members and bringing them through that process. But I would say one of the things that we've done at our organization is just talk about the member journey and process improvement. So if we can bring all the teams along and talk about what processes in your area can be improved that would make your life easier and in turn make the members' life easier, what can those be? And so getting all of the leaders of those areas to kind of think that way and go through that process and then take on the project and actually make the improvement and see the success. I think that's one of the ways we can do it. We've talked a little bit about that, I think, at this conference so far, just how can we prove our success, right? So if we have small wins that we can share with our team members, then the buy-in can kind of slowly but surely come along.
Yeah, it is. It's about moving it forward, right? And I think that's the big part. We cannot stay the same. We can't go back. So, take some chances, just keep pushing it forward.
Is there something, now I'm kind of thinking about, say, you're fairly new to the credit union. Doesn't mean you're fairly new in your career, but they brought you in for a reason. If somebody was listening today and they were like, ooh, I'm starting a new gig, and this credit union's historically not been too progressive. Any thoughts? Friends you've seen do it well?
I guess my first thought would just be to learn and listen for a little before jumping in and saying, let's change this and let's do that. And I have this idea, because you kind of need to build that trust and credibility. They brought you in as an expert, so hopefully they already trust that you're an expert. But I think listening and understanding maybe the reasons why the credit union's, not progressing forward or not, doing things in new ways will help you to make your case and kind of give more of a structured idea instead of just kind of jumping in too fast and having people be like, whoa, that's too much for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's being that listener. You'll find out the people who aren't as risk adverse as you kind of learn the organization, the ones that are risk takers, the ones who want to evolve the organization, move things forward. And, you kind of pull them into that little circle you got until you've got, you've got a pretty good team that can go and make those recommendations and have something behind it.
A question that interests me right now, at least in this point in time, is I think over the past couple of years, to go backwards a little bit, we've all realized, or many of us have realized, that work isn't necessarily that physical location. We'd heard for years that remote work couldn't happen in credit unions and a lot of other places. So I guess I've enjoyed asking people because I'm so curious by this, but what do you think it looks like to work in a credit union or for a credit union going forward or down the road? If somebody was graduating from college in the next few years and we want them to come work for credit unions, we need more talent, right? Like, what does a career in credit unions look like down the road?
I mean, well, what we hope for is that working in a credit union looks a little bit different than it has in the past, right? We do want to attract that talent. We want to bring people in that, like I said earlier, are passionate about the credit union movement, but also know that we're ready now to move forward and pivot and make these changes. And then one of the other things that I would hit on that I feel really strongly about is over the past couple of years in credit unions, or just in our world, I feel like the pandemic and Zoom meetings and all this stuff has just humanized us a little bit more. And I think we've always needed that in financial institutions, right? Financial institutions have traditionally just been conservative organizations, and, we're all wearing suits and ties and things like that. But gosh, it humanized us so much to have a Zoom call and someone's kids running around in the background or their dog and it's like, that's okay. Cause now we're human and we're dealing with people's financial life, and that's a mess, right? And so I just think that's such an important piece. And I think somebody new coming in to work at a credit union would find that also important. How does their personal life fit into their job? Not how do I balance life and work, but how does my life fit into my job?
Randy, what about you?
I think it is. I think it's that, that the whole culture is changed, and we're so much more used to mobile and Zoom, and Bonner talked about that a little bit this morning too, that we just have to make that part of the process of how we contact, how we talk to our members, rather than talking on the, maybe our call centers become Zoom centers. I mean, why not? We're using it. Let's teach our members how to use it. So we're still face to face with them. It just adds a little more personal touch when you're looking at somebody rather than just talking to them in the ear. I think we just have to continue to push that.
Absolutely. Another one of these, again, scratch my own itch, is this idea of when you're going through a decision-making process, whether that's big change or a small change. What I've noticed is, like in credit unions, is we have the ability to really make those decisions fairly quickly and to make substantial changes. But the big thing is making sure it's the right change at the right time. I can, again, think of many things at CUInsight that I thought were the right things at the right time that weren't. Maybe y'all weren't ready for yet, right? Or it was just a bad idea. But how do you make sure that you're making the right change and you're pushing for the right thing at the right time?
Are we ever really sure of that?
Right. Well, I would say, and this is something I struggle with personally, is I'm kind of a perfectionist in some ways. And so I think sometimes we just have to remind ourselves that something might not be perfect, but we need to try it, and we need to get out there and we need to actually do it, because we can exhaust ourselves by looking at every angle of things and figuring out what's the right thing to do and is it going to work? And we need to, be methodical in our process for decision making, but we also need to be willing to take a little bit of risk and say, okay, this isn't perfect, but we're ready and we want to see how it's going to go.
I'm probably on the opposite end of January. So, I probably a little bit more of a risk taker, and just know it's got to be fluid. You got to be able to change it and move it without destroying something.
All right. So it wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience without some rapid fire questions. So we're going to have a little bit of fun to wrap this up, so we leave time for Q&A afterwards as well. So here we go. And I will bounce around because I know Jen didn't want to really answer one of them. So we'll go back and forth for you guys here. But when was the last time you were amazed, either personally or professionally?
Honestly, this morning, I love the crowd we had today and the speaker we had. Like I said, I think what Bonin had and what he said today, there was so much there that I got to go back now and find him and listen to him and read his book and everything else. It just kind of re-energized me. So
for me, on a personal level, and this sounds kind of cliche, I'm sure, but I'm constantly amazed by my children. They are just so bold and willing to try new things all the time. And I'm just always really amazed and impressed by their courage for doing new things.
How old are the kids?
16 and almost 14.
Wow, teenagers still amazing.
Teenagers.
Yeah, amazing.
Yes.
No. That amazed me. I think all of us, part of being here and stuff, is trying to, kind of excel in your career and do things like that. But how do you create that balance in life, that work life? You just mentioned your kids. I think we've all seen it. A lot of us that travel and do all these type of things too. It often can be at the detriment of personal relationships, right? So like any hacks you found over the career?
Gosh, I'm still trying to figure out that work-life balance thing. I think it's all just meshes together now. I definitely think, making time for your important people is super key. I wish I had some hack where I said, every morning I get up and do yoga, but we already talked earlier about how inflexible we are. I have found, and I know some of you are waiting for me to comment on my Peloton, which I'm obsessed with, but that is something I found over the last couple years where I've been able to be consistent. It really helps me kind of keep that positive mindset and not get too stressed out and overwhelmed by all the things that are, inevitably happening in life.
Pelotons and puppies.
I think it's just what I've learned. I think what probably a lot of people have is that through the hybrid work and being at home is it's pretty good for you when you take a little time for yourself and just step away from the computer, stepping away from the phone, go out and do something. I've got too many Aussies that are now just a year old and, they keep me grounded a little bit. I have to take them out. I've got things I have to do and kind of like kids.
See, Pelotons and puppies. Didn't you just say that?
Puppies,
Kids and puppies. Well,
right?
I mean, what else can you want, right? You got to have one or the other.
Randy, what's the greatest album of all time?
Mine would be Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti.
There you go. And you don't want to answer this. So, all right.
Maybe a little Black
I like
Sabbath.
too many different things. I can't answer. I don't have one.
The first time Jill was on the show, it was the question that stumped her the most too. So, yeah.
That makes me feel a little better.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Yeah. So what are you currently reading? Or is there a book that you think everybody should read?
Okay, so I'm currently reading a book called Trust Yourself, and some of you will like this. It's Stop Overthinking and Channel Your Emotions for Success at Work. I'm very much an open book as it relates to my emotions, and for a long time I thought that was a bad thing. But anyways, this is a really cool way to look at, how to trust yourself and really stop questioning everything so that you do better in work and at home, I would say. And then I recently saw a speaker, and I haven't read this book yet, but I'm really excited to read it. It's called Trusted Leader by David Horsager. And it talks about the 8 pillars that drive results. And it really is around trust. And I love that concept for us because in credit unions, in any company, right, you have to build trust with your team, with your members, and those things really drive success all around. And so he was a really dynamic speaker, and I'm excited to see what the book is all about.
Well, the word success ties into my next question. Randy, when you hear the word success, who's the first person that comes to mind and why?
Well, the obvious answer would be you. I mean, look what you've done with CUInsight in how many years and being able to do it scuba diving off of an island in who knows where. If that isn't success, I don't know what is. Second, as much as this probably sounds cliche, Mark Webber, who I've known for 30 years probably, has done so much with his life, not only with this organization that I'm a part of now, but he's also part of a nonprofit called Agros International. They build villages in third world countries. They set up financial institutions for them, all self-sustaining, those types of things. And that's a pretty good work-life balance, I think, for somebody to admire that.
Oh my gosh. There's so many people I would think of. I mean, there's so many people in our industry that I admire so much. Some of them are sitting here in this room, but I don't know. The other people I would think of when I think of success is my parents. You know, they didn't have everything growing up and they built a great life for us. And now they have a bunch of grandchildren running around and they're loving life. So that sounds successful to me too.
And your dad's here, so you got to give him a shout out.
And it's almost his birthday.
All right. So
we probably should
I said this
sing
was
that
not allowed. Cut that from the recording.
That's good. Well, there you go. That is it. That is the CUInsight Experience. I want to thank Jennifer and Randy so much for doing this and being guests on the show. I greatly enjoyed spending time with you today and being here with you in Chicago. If people have additional questions of you, what's your poison? Email, Twitter, LinkedIn? How can they find you?
All the things. Find me on LinkedIn and definitely feel free to reach out.
And there's always texting, right? Now we should all have text me things, right? Yeah. But I think so too. I've got a card. Go on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, I can't believe how many people I look for on LinkedIn and you're not there. That is one of the greatest resources you have in credit union land is other people and being able to link up with them on that. So that's a good spot.
Well, we will link to all that contact information in the show notes and also everything else that we talked about today. So thank you again for being here and having me. A few things before we go. Make sure to check out Allied Solutions in the show notes. I'm grateful for their support of the podcast. They allow me to have this much fun doing what I do. And for those listening at home, I'd tell you also to take a look at MAC. It is a fantastic group of credit union folks, and you guys should come next year. So please also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all. And if you're there and you think we're worth 5 stars, please give us that review. If you don't, forget I asked. So it does help with the visibility of the show. And if you're looking for the books mentioned today on the show or any book from any episode, a quick Google of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, and you can find your next read and have it on its way from Amazon. So with that, certainly last but not least, thank all of you for listening. Thank all of you for being here today and letting us do this. Y'all rock. And I hope everyone is well and look forward to seeing you all soon.